Bleach 1000 Year Blood War episode 28, the second episode of Cour 3 has just released and it has left me feeling speechless. I classify this as the true first episode of Cour 3. Not only is there a noticeable improvement in the art and animation, but there is more anime original content than ever before. The boost of the quality from changing from Studio Pierrot to Pierrot Films is being showcased here. Now this isn't a new animation studio, it is still Studio Pierrot, and it's even the same staff but just with a new desire to do better than what was done before. Episode 28, titled Kill the King, begins with a jaw-dropping flashback scene which leads into the opening song. During the episode we have an intense 8-minute anime original battle sequence between Yhwach and Ichigo, and this builds up to one of the most shocking moments in the entire story. People who have read the manga will notice huge differences between how certain scenes have been handled in this episode, as all of the changes and additions make for a very entertaining 20 minutes of anime. We cover roughly 3 chapters worth of content in this episode, spanning from chapters 612 all the way up until the end of chapter 614. This material is packed with anime exclusive editions which build upon the story of the manga. Now be sure to stick around until the very end of this video because I'll be breaking down and analyzing everything that you need to know about this incredible flashback of young Yhwach and the new information that we learn about the Soul King. So without further delay, let's begin my review of episode 28 of the 1000 Year Blood War arc anime. We got really tired of the same old boring anime shirts, so we decided to launch Getsuga.com with the aim of creating designs inspired by our favorite anime and manga. We came up with designs that look cool and represent all of our favorite stories. Check out the latest Instinct collection which features some amazing designs like this Frosted Heavens design inspired by Toshiro Hitsugaya, or this Instinct design inspired by Hollow Ichigo, and my personal favorite which is the Heart design which was inspired by Ukiura Shifa. Do not miss out, go to Getsuga.com and wear your favorite stories. So much insanity unfolds during this episode that it's hard to contain my excitement, because this episode begins full throttle with an anime original flashback sequence which takes us a couple of rewatches in order to fully understand. Now the most striking thing about this flashback in my opinion is how it begins with a good view of what the Soul King's Almighty had looked like back in its prime. It takes on an appearance nothing like any Almighty variant that we have seen in the story so far, and it only gets even more hype from here. From what we're shown next, it's basically Yhwach watching the Soul King create the 3 realms of Hueco Mundo, the world of the living and the Soul Society. And when this happens, Yhwach rapidly ages before he seemingly is born in the world of the living. It is a mind-bending sequence that happens here, and it definitely adds an emotional edge to Yhwach's character, because none of this was revealed within the manga. Yuha is saddened by the fact that he has to kill his father, even though he believes that it is necessary for him to do so. This does shed a bit of a sympathetic light onto Yuha's character. It also does a lot for the lore of the story, as this scene highlights the connection between Ichigo, the Soul King, and Yuha as well, because in this moment Ichigo is also receiving a vision of his own future from the Soul King. I do wonder if it's the Soul King willingly sending him these warnings, or if this is a product of some sort of resonance between the two of them, due to the fact that Ichigo is an embodiment of every single race similar to the Soul King. I really did enjoy seeing Orihime utilize her Fullbring abilities to carry everybody up to the Soul King's palace, which was a really nice touch because we haven't properly seen this since Ichigo vs Ukiura, and it was certainly a nice addition to this episode. When Ichigo and the others arrive at the Soul King's greater palace, things get really crazy. Now if you recall, Ichigo and Yhwach had a few brief scuffles earlier in the Soul Society. These pretty much achieved nothing but to establish that Yuha was far stronger than Ichigo. Just like their fight in Cour 1, the anime takes that brief encounter in the Soul King's palace and it transforms it into an absolute feast for the eyes. The introductory dialogue between the two characters remains the same as the manga, but then we shift into some anime original dialogue, which brings me to the first thing that I truly loved about this confrontation. It was the fact that Yuha was excited to fight Ichigo again. He appeared to be genuinely curious in seeing how much Ichigo has grown, and in a manner that is similar to their final fight in the manga, Yuha deactivates against the Almighty so that he can have a spoiler-free battle with Ichigo. It's like he purposefully nerfed himself like Kenpachi does, just so that he can prolong the enjoyment of battle. Now this fight was nothing short of spectacular, not just because of the fantastic animation and storyboarding in episode 28, but also because of the clear shift in the power dynamics between Ichigo and Yuha. For the first time ever, Ichigo completely dominates Yhwach in the first half of the battle. Yuha was finally on the defensive while fighting Ichigo, which is something that I've been dying to see for the longest time. This was exhilarating, seeing Ichigo casually counter some of Yhwach's strongest attacks like Qual Crease, which is so satisfying considering that this was the same attack that Yuha had used to defeat him in their first battle in Core 1. Yhwach gets so desperate that he uses Zankt Swinger, which Ichigo counters by blowing him up with a Getsuga Jujisho. I'm not kidding when I said this was one of the most cathartic moments in the entire anime, and the animation does not disappoint. The animation makes it feel like it's truly a clash of the titans, and they fight on a scale that we've rarely ever seen in the series. Now all good things do come to an end, because we all know that there was no way that Yhwach was going to let Ichigo keep disrespecting him like that. As Yuha gets up from the rubble and brushes himself off, he reactivates the Almighty, as he then dishes out all of the disrespect that he had just received, and well, the rest is history. There truly is so much to love about this over 8-minute long anime original fight scenes, especially the dialogue between the two of them, and it feels reminiscent of a teacher testing a student to see how much that they have learned, and Yuha is positively surprised by Ichigo's growth and evolution. He even praises some of Ichigo's tactical choices, like when he uses his mini Getsuga to counter Yhwach's giant holy arrow. Moments like this were both wholesome but terrifying at the same time, because it honestly felt like Yhwach wasn't taking Ichigo that seriously, and he saw the battle with him as nothing more than a fun game with his son. Now unlike his past opponents, Yhwach treats Ichigo with respect and even expresses a sort of appreciation for the struggle that Ichigo went through in order to attain his current power. It's small details like this that really make me wonder what would have happened if Ichigo and Yhwach had met under different circumstances. I guess we got a glimpse of this with Ichigo's relationship with Old Man Zangetsu, since he was the embodiment of Ichigo's Quincy powers. This episode's anime original fight sequence is definitely one of my favorites in the entire show. I first of all love the fact that the earthquakes and tremors have continued from the time that Yhwach had stabbed the Soul King, which is a really nice display of continuity. And secondly, I really liked how the manga material involving Soifon, Maida, Momo, Shinji, and even Renji and Rukia was reworked and added into this episode. Not everything is one-to-one adapted from the manga, a lot of stuff is streamlined and cut down, but I think that it works really well in this episode. Also, via the interactions between Shinji and Momo, we can see that Shinji has played a major role in helping to recover Momo and to gain her confidence back, especially after all of the trauma that she endured at the hands of Aizen. This episode also includes new scenes of Ukitake giving his very all in order to heal Kenpachi, who appears to be on the verge of death. This small scene gives Ukitake so much more relevance within the anime, as a lot of this happens off screen, but if you didn't know, Ukitake was the one who had saved Kenpachi's life, and this is a huge feat for a character who outside of Mimi Hagi doesn't really do much during the 1000-Year Blood War arc. And these anime original scenes that are being added explain how Kenpachi was able to make a full recovery after being on the verge of death following the brutal assault that he had suffered at the hands of the Bambis. Ukitake is healing Kenpachi and he's like, no, you cannot die yet. Following this, we get another original scene which fantastically explores the motives of Yhwach, and this is masterfully conveyed to us via dialogue from Yhwach and some input even from Urahara. This makes it feel like less of an exposition dump from Yhwach, as it feels like a genuine declaration of Yuha's motivation instead. This really does help us to sympathize with Yhwach instead of him just coming across as a stereotypical villain, as we truly get to appreciate his reasons for fighting. This episode also reveals to us the real name of the Soul King, which is ADNYEUS, and this was kind of hinted at us at the end of Core 2 with Yhwach's Ashwalen Chan. I am going to go over this in more detail in my manga versus anime comparison video tomorrow, so do not miss it, because this is honestly a huge piece of information which Kubo has revealed. I'll also be explaining how the name of the Soul King is linked to the Gnostic sun god of the same name. All of these theories linking ADNYEUS to the Soul King are absolutely insane, so definitely do stick around for tomorrow's video as I'll have way more time to talk about them then. Now the interaction between Renji and Rukia in this episode, which comes immediately afterwards, is another really great moment that I'm sure a lot of Renji Rukia fans are going to appreciate. appreciate, as Rukia expresses her concern about Ichigo and the others, as Renji then does a fantastic job of reassuring her. Now, before I forget, this episode also does a really good job at showing us the threat of the destruction of the three worlds, and it makes it way more believable than the manga did. We're constantly shown characters talking about what is going on across all of the three realms as they experience the tremors following the impalement of the Soul King. And then even after Ichigo cuts the Soul King into two, we see Ichigo's friends in the world of the living. We also have reactions from Isshin and Ryuken and even glimpses of Hueco Mundo, and it makes the stakes feel so much higher. And speaking of Ryuken, during one of the earlier scenes in this episode, he is shown seated in his study as the earthquakes begin, and we see that he is holding in his hand what appears to be tiny pieces of something silver. I completely lost it when I realized that this is our first glimpse of the infamous Silver of Stillness. This is nothing short of a genius choice for them to foreshadow it this early on, and I'm super excited to see the kind of role that the Silver of Stillness will play in the upcoming episodes of the 1000 Year Blood War arc anime. Once the Quincy blood in Ichigo compels him to kill the Soul King, we see the universe truly begin to unravel, and the instability of the three realms is shown to us in much more of a higher scale than we had ever seen within the manga. And speaking of Ichigo killing the Soul King, I really enjoyed the anime's take on the whole moment. We see Yhwach ask Ichigo why he's even fighting in the first place now that he knows the truth about the Soul King, and I feel like that this is a setup for a moment in the future where Ichigo will answer this question, because Yoruichi does step in before Ichigo has a chance to answer Yuha, and it's a question that fans have been asking for a long time, so I am looking forward to Ichigo's response to this question. Aside from all of the new dialogue in this episode, things play out very similarly to the manga, but there is a lot of chopping and changing around and reorganizing of the sequence of events from chapters 612 all the way up until chapter 614, and there are even tidbits of chapter 615 that are incorporated into this episode. There is a lot of stuff that is cut out, however, and I'll be going over this in more detail in my manga versus anime analysis video tomorrow. With the Soul King being cut in two, that brings episode 28 to an end, and episode 29's poem comes right after the ending, and it's a perfect representation of the sacrifice that Ukitake is about to make in the upcoming episode, which I absolutely cannot wait to see. And just to note, there is no post-credit scene this week. From the very moment that the staff list for episode 28 was revealed, I think that we all knew that this episode was going to be a good one, and it definitely lived up to all of the hype in that regard. First of all, let's talk about the stellar art direction in this episode, as we have Ichiro Uno on board as one of the animation directors, and I'm completely unsurprised by the fact that the episode is filled with really strong drawings and characters who remain on model throughout. There was never really a point where I'd paused this episode and found an off-model frame or anything of the sort. I also think that Mr. Leo Kawamoto deserves some flowers for this one as well, since he is a rather great artist who can perfectly replicate Kubo's art style. Episode 28 truly was a huge step up in the quality in comparison to last week's episode, when you look at how refined and polished the colors and effects feel, to how great the CGI backgrounds looked in the fights, all the way to how explosive the action animation had felt. It is evident that this is definitely a step in the right direction, especially when you realize that this episode isn't even a priority episode considering what happens in it. So if this non-priority episode got so much love, just think about the amazing quality that we're going to be getting in the upcoming episodes where some really high priority major events are about to unfold. The standout cut for this episode would have to be what I'm certain is Atsushi Wakabayashi's cut of Yhwach and Ichigo zipping across the higher Soul King realm like Dragon Ball characters. Their clashing all across the sky was extremely dynamic, and it uses some loose drawings that Wakabayashi is known for in order to create a high-speed sequence. There were also some other great cuts of animation sprinkled throughout, which had made this a very well-rounded episode. Last but not least, Tomohisa Taguchi's storyboard in this episode was fantastic. It was so good that I genuinely believe that it was the best thing about this week's installment of Bleach. It made everything feel so incredibly cinematic with the large layouts and incredible shots, and a personal favorite of mine is the shot where Ichigo was floating in the sky as Yhwach lay on the ground during their fight. The layout for this scene was phenomenal, as the close-ups on Ichigo as his Getsuga Jujisho was still active behind him had given him this divine feel. This episode had a masterfully crafted storyboard, and I hope that we do get to see more solo storyboards from Taguchi this cour. Well, all in all, this was my review for episode 28 of the 1000 Year Blood War arc anime. Next week's episode is titled The Dark Arm, and it promises to reveal new information about Ukitake, we can definitely expect more anime original scenes, considering how many additions were made in this episode. The new scenes really fleshed out the motives of Yhwach and highlighted the determination of Ichigo in face of despair. Also, learning new information about the Soul King like his name was jaw-dropping, especially since it was revealed a year ago at the end of Cour 2, with chaos spreading across 3 realms, and with the confirmation that the Soul King is in fact dead, the story is really kicking into high gear as we truly enter the second half of this story arc. So what are your thoughts on episode 28? Were you as shocked as I was by the reveal of the Soul King's name? What about the flashback featuring young Yhwach, and how could I forget the incredible 8-minute anime exclusive fight sequence between Yhwach and Ichigo? The next episode ended with a poem featuring Ukitake's character, so that is something to definitely look forward to. As always, do stay tuned to the channel because I'm going to be back tomorrow with a in-depth manga versus anime comparison video of this week's episode, and there is a lot to go over because so much material from the manga was restructured and changed around, so you don't want to miss my video breaking it all down. Lastly, thank you for making it to the very end of this video, and I cannot wait to see you tomorrow for my detailed breakdown of the second episode of Cour 3. A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.